Do you know the one that gets overlooked all the time is the state of mind of the owners. And actually, if the owners are in a good place, you might find that that's a sign the agency's in quite a good place.
Wat heeft een bureau nodig om financieel gezond te blijven en te kunnen groeien? Hey, hallo. Welkom bij Agency Life, de podcast over het reilen en zeilen van digitale en creatieve bureaus. Ik ben Robin en vandaag hebben we het over financiën. Want een agency runnen is niet makkelijk en het is heel jammer als die inspanningen niet beloond worden. Want in deze sector betekent druk zijn niet altijd dat je ook winstgevend bent. Veel agencies draaien overuren en hebben een stroom aan projecten, maar de winst die blijft soms achter. Dus praat ik met Mark Probert, een accountant die agency consultant werd. Hij is de managing partner bij Cactus, waar hij agencies helpt om gezond te schalen, en de oprichter van Agencynomics, het grootste gratis peer-supported netwerk van agency owners in het Verenigd Koninkrijk. Agencynomics is trouwens ook een boek met 40 technieken om succesvol te schalen tot een team van 50. Met Cactus en Agencynomics ondersteunen Mark en zijn collega's al zo'n 20.000 bureaus. Met andere woorden, this guy knows what he's talking about. Mark kent de financiële valkuilen die agencies tegenhouden en de manieren om die valkuilen handig te ontwijken. Vandaag deelt hij er een paar met ons. Welkom bij Agency Life. En terwijl Mark wacht in de coulissen, doe ik snel nog een shout-out naar de sponsor van deze podcast. Teamleader Orbit. Een agency runnen, dat is jong leren met projecten, klanten en financiën. Teamleader Orbit geeft je de tools om alles op rolletjes te laten lopen. Ga naar teamleader.eu/orbit en boek een gratis assessment. Hello Mark.
Hi there, Robin. Nice to meet you.
You have been speaking to a lot of people, a lot of agency owners throughout the years, and by talking to all these people, I guess you've discovered a certain trait that some of them seem to have, which is the idea that as long as revenue is coming in, their business is healthy. Why is that a dangerous mindset, you feel?
For me, if I give the example of a production agency is the classic one. So let's say they win a piece of work, 100,000, I'm going to say euros, you're in Europe, 100,000 euros, yeah? Immediately everyone's ringing the bell and high-fiving and all the rest of it. Great, £100,000. Of course I'm going to say this because I'm a finance person, but it's quite staggering how many don't have any processes for billing and so on. So 100,000 euros, we've won it. We haven't got the money yet. Okay, that's just waiting to be billed. We haven't got the PO is the classic. So we think we've won it. We think we've done the sales. The owner in the smaller independent agency world is thinking, I've made €100,000 sale. Now, you know, that work might not be done in March. It might be done in April, May, June. So some of the challenges are the owner thinks they've sold it. They haven't actually delivered the work yet. There might be €30,000 of third-party costs. You know, so they've sold 100,000. They haven't got the money yet. They've only actually going to get 70,000, not 100,000, because they've got the supplier costs that come up front often, sometimes. So suddenly you've got no money in the door, but we're paying money out. We haven't delivered the work yet. And in the smaller agencies, quite rightly in some ways because of finance resource, they try and keep it quite simple and say, we'll recognise the revenue in the month we bill it. But when they do that, they might have a supplier invoice, which is the following month. So you have this anomaly, don't you? Income this month, costs the next month. So as you get bigger, and I would say a lot of this depends on finance resource, and that's a challenge for agency owners to get their heads around sometimes, getting a non-fee earner and a good one, is when you get a bit bigger, $1.5 million, whatever, you might bring in a finance person.
So if I can summarize, agencies are basically focusing too much on like the top line revenue, ignoring the actual cash flow and margins and whatnot that come with it. Correct?
So quite often I get asked, what are the things an agency needs? Right, there's four things for me. Robust pipeline tool. Now, what have we seen? Unlike Teamleader and so on, you know, lots of CRM, stage-based leads, all the rest of it. But we built a spreadsheet, you're going to laugh, probably 15 years ago, that's in a lot of the agencies that we work in, which it's hard to describe on a call why it's so valuable, but it it basically succinctly has all the revenue that the agency's definitely 100% confirmed got, plus, like it would in a CRM, the weighted potential around some of the opportunity. So that sheet gives us what revenue is actually going to be in this business March, April, May, and you might have it on an invoice basis and you might have it on a work done basis as well, okay, for cash flow and so on. The second one would be a financial budget. Now, that doesn't have to be rocket science. And I know, again, I'm saying it as a perspective of, I know how to do a financial budget. I should do, shouldn't I? But I don't know how to build a website. So if I'm working with a web owner, I'm going to help them build a financial budget. For me, it's easy, but what they do is hard for me. So, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is so many people think doing a budget is really difficult. But I would say get somebody that knows what they're doing to help you set up a simple spreadsheet. You can put it into a FP&A piece of software. Just have a budget. That's the second thing. The third thing is to say you've got to have a cash flow, even if you're swimming in money. And that can be as minimal as a 3 month rolling. But that's fundamental, I would say. And I say whichever way you are, because some retained businesses, digital marketing businesses often have got quite a bit of money, might be a bit more conservative as well. You might want to buy something, especially in the current world where there is quite a bit of, believe it or not, there is quite a bit of M&A activity going on in the smaller indie space. So, and the fourth thing is a robust management accounts for the month. So a robust management account with a few KPIs in, not hundreds. I can go through the few that I would have if you want in a minute, but a robust management accounts, a cash flow, a budget, and a pipeline. Now, the pipeline should be owned by the sales and account management team. In the smaller agencies, probably the owner as well. Yeah, but the other three, it's probably a finance person. And the challenge is often, as a small agency is scaling, they don't want to, or they find it difficult to get finance resource in play. They don't know what they need. So I suppose what I'm saying is the challenge is often you want those four things. And I fundamentally think you need those four things because everything else spins off of that, create a marketing budget, etc. They don't invest in the finance bit earlier on. And now, I was talking about it with a client this morning. I don't know what it's like over in Europe, but fractional is the word at the moment in every single role out there, isn't it?
Yeah,
Fractional
CMOs and whatnot.
Exactly, CTO, everything. But there are a lot more people doing that. And if you can get the right one, you do not need a full-time finance person at different levels. You could get a really good part-time person to do those things. You could get a bookkeeper to do X, Y, and Z, and you could invest a tiny bit in getting somebody to make sure those 3 or 4 things are nailed down. Same on the marketing to some extent. We see that a lot. People often go, I'll get a marketing director, big grandiose title, and, salary probably. But quite often in the smaller indie space, I'm talking like 1 million, 2 million, whatever, it might be better to get a fractional person to oversee somebody that's the doer. The doer can do the stuff. The marketing, more senior person can oversee it, fractional. So I think it's about being cost effective in the way you scale is often the thing that we see. But people don't want that often. They want to hire a full-time finance manager. Oh, I can't afford it. I won't do that yet. And then they don't get the data they need.
So if you invest in like these 4 or 5 fundamental financial resources from the start, then you can get by really healthily with just a fractional finance person.
I think you have to have somebody doing the doing. So that might be a bookkeeper again, but that might be limited amount of time. And then just somebody overseeing it so that the stress and the pressure is taken off of the owner, who often, no disrespect to the owner, but they didn't go in the business as a finance person. They went in as a creative or a web developer. And some of them might be very good at finance, but actually, do you really want them doing the finance? Do they really want to be doing the finance? If they're not doing the finance, it's the 80-20 rule, isn't it? I'm doing all this stuff. I really should be doing the 20%. I shouldn't be doing the 80, but often you find people go into the 80, they do the finance, they pick that up. They need more and more. The world of the fractional is definitely helping agencies. Definitely. Yeah.
You dropped the word metrics and KPI, the magic word, earlier already. So besides the fundamental resources, what are your 5, 6, I don't know, fundamental KPIs that agencies should watch out for?
Okay. Do you want me to just say finance-related ones? Because
I'd love to hear the finance-related ones, and then you can give me the not
a couple
so
of others.
Yeah. Because I'm curious what those might be. But let's start with the finance ones.
Okay. The finance ones. I mean, There's a few, isn't there? This is probably in no order because I don't want to do disservice to the others. If I start with the liquidity stuff first, because often people dive into the P&L, revenue per head, they always. But I would say in the current climate, liquidity, because it's very telling of other ratios. There's a simple ratio. It's called the current ratio. Okay, now the current ratio, just to explain it, is if you look at your balance sheet, okay, you mix it with this. There's two ratios I would look at as a starter. So you go, I've got my balance sheet, I've got my current assets. My current assets are debtors or aged receivables, what I'm owed from my customers, bank and cash, because that's a fact, it's in my bank. And I can, in theory, unless there's any bad debts, I can get my hands on that money immediately. So those two numbers added together, divided by my current liabilities, which, if I think about the UK, is my suppliers, my VAT, my PAYE and NI to HMRC. It might be that you might have some loans, the short-term bit of that, the next 12 months is included in that. So if I take the two numbers at the beginning, divide it by that current liability number, that will give me my current ratio. That is telling me roughly how many so if it works out, it was 100,000 euros divided by 50, it would be 2 to 1. Okay, I've got probably €2 to every pound. So that's in an agency, not a retained one. That's probably project-based agency. That's not too bad. Okay, that's pretty okay. It probably is a sign of you could last for a few months without much revenue coming through. Okay. Now the big caveat, if it's 1 to 1 or less than 1, you've got cash flow issues. Okay. If you've got 3 or 4 to 1 and above, let's say you've got 3 or 4 to 1, you're probably in quite a good position across a lot of agencies. If you're above that and you were asking about growing, then unless you were a massively like value-based proposition, I would be saying you've got too many assets. And then the other couple of key ones, everyone bangs on about people costs to gross profit. So what I mean by that is, if I go back to my scenario earlier, 100,000 euros, 30,000 goes out the door, I discount that. I've got 70,000 GP coming into the business gross profit. I want to see and measure how my people costs are against that. If it's over, a lot of people don't have offices now, okay, so maybe they can push the ratio up a little bit. But if it's any more than 65-ish%, if it's regular, it's too high. You've probably got, it's a whole myriad of things. I probably don't need to go into why it's a problem, but that's the ratio I'd look at. And I think, yes, there is profit. Obviously, you want to make profit. But I think those couple of ones are quite telling, actually. And I think the last one is probably at the moment is just watching your subcontractor costs.
You said also the non-financial ones. Which are these magical, mysterious non-financial KPIs?
Do you know the one that gets overlooked all the time is the state of mind of the owners.
Oh.
So people have, a lot of agencies here use Office Vibe, a culture score, employee net promoter score. That's obviously very important. I don't know what agencies you used to seeing and that use, but having a sense of how the employees are feeling is obviously very, very important. But I've just said it there, it's employees, it's not often the owners. So, and you can look at all the marketing stats, can't you? And there's some important ones there. But I think most times I've gone into a business, had a look at it. A lot of them don't have dashboards, succinct one. I'm only talking succinct ones around each area of the business. All the detail can be somewhere else. But we implemented quite a long time ago. For some clients, you don't do it all the time, but every meeting, right, how are you feeling on a score of 1 to 10 in the last 3 or 4 weeks since we've spoken to you? And you might not get it's a 6. You might get a 6. Oh, it's a 6, but I don't really want to expand on it. Fine, okay. You might get to the next time. Yeah, it's a 5. Okay, right. Well, we need to start talking then. It goes back to my point about being open and honest. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody cares about their team and their, but sometimes probably a bit of a self-assessment of how you're doing is the right thing. Oh God, very spiritual on this, aren't I? But it's overlooked. It's overlooked. And actually, if the owners are in a good place, you might find that that's a sign the agency's in quite a good place.
And if the mindset or the state of mind of the owner is not, then that might indicate what bad decision making.
bad decision making. They might have cash flow problems. It's stressing them out. They're in a bad place because they're trying to save the business. They're in a bad place because no sales have come in. They're in a bad place because they've got umpteen HR issue, employment issue, people issues.
I think we can universalize your message perhaps a bit to the agency owners who find themselves struggling a bit mentally, a bit overwhelmed. Either get the finance person who takes away that stuff that you're not quite good at, or you get the HR person that takes away the stuff that you might not be good at, or even both. The key is focus on what you can do and what you can control and what you can do well, instead of keeping all these plates afloat and then bungling up some stuff.
Absolutely. I had a client call towards the end of last week where literally I've probably still got it in my book. We drew the circle. So if I think about the sort of 5 areas of the business, you've got sales, marketing, finance, operations, culture, in my sort of view. Okay. And all the other bits, AI goes into a bit of whatever, they all fit in that. And we were sort of pulling apart the business, going, well, who ultimately owns these things? Who ultimately owns them? And actually, one of the owners was about 4 of them. and then they were saying, coming into that call, they felt stressed, all the rest of it, and so on. I think going back to that fractional bit, all of this weaves in, doesn't it? It's like, I know it's very hard. We run a business. It's very hard to get out and think sometimes high level, but hey, that's what I try and help my clients with, is you go, well, just write down on, I know it sounds so easy, but write down on a sheet of paper, draw a line down the middle of it, and during the week, just dot down things that you did that you shouldn't have done. On the other side, things that you've done that you want to do more of, and get to the end of the week, have a look at it. You can use a tool or whatever. And it's amazing how often those things on the left can fit into a fractional person. I know there's the whole bit then of, do I trust them? Can I afford it? Am I a good delegator? But actually, if you think you can't afford it, you're probably not going to scale the business very well, because they'll solve your challenges, those people. So you need to focus in on that. Get that stuff on the left sorted.
I saw you post quite a while back, don't raise your prices.
Oh.
The message of the post being, stop over-servicing and actually charge for the work you do before raising your pricing. Is this something you see often, agencies raising their rates instead of charging their actual hours?
So the point of that post was, why focus on trying to have all these difficult conversations that some of them you're going to risk of losing the client? What can you actually focus on? You can make a change in your business. You can improve processes. You can improve efficiency. I'm not a process warrior, by the way. But what I mean is, often people, it's like the marketing. We call it the doorstep challenge. People will look for the new thing, the new shiny toy, the new sales lead. Okay? What they often don't do is they don't look at their clients, and they don't work with their clients well enough, and they don't get more things from their clients. Now, what have people had a lot of success last year in doing, or in the main? They've not won new business over in here in the UK. They've got existing client revenues coming in. So I think that's a little bit like the pricing bit is, why do that? You could make more money by becoming more efficient and looking at your process stuff.
Let's talk about red flags for a minute before we go over to the next section of this podcast. So red flags, what are some of the early signs that an agency might be heading for some financial trouble?
Seeing the owner's face, does that sound a bit... That's not a flippant answer, by the way. I didn't mean that wrong. You can put that one on there. It's quite telling often that. I think there are obviously signs, financial metrics now, which I mentioned, but in some ways it's a bit harder, isn't it? Now a lot of meetings are done on Zoom and so on, and it's hard to read body language sometimes. But I think actually when you've done this for quite a few years like this, which obviously I've got a few grey hairs and I've done this for quite a while, you can read body signs now even on Zoom calls. It's quite and I think for me, if the question was around with my clients, I've been with them for quite a while, most of winning new clients now, but I've got a good relationship. I've probably met them all. I make an effort to do that, and so much I think anyone should. You can tell from they don't quite look engaged on the screen, and sometimes it might be because their child's running around the background, but that only lasts for 5. You can tell, and then I think the obvious other ones then are financial, isn't it? If you look at that ratio I mentioned, current ratio, if that's sort of getting quite low, if the business profits aren't really coming through, if you're speaking to because I tend to interact with the owners, not the wider teams, if you don't get a sense, it's probably like you in some ways, isn't it? I would imagine. I always want to suss people out and believe that I can have a rapport with them and build a rapport with them and be truthful and honest. We always do.
Mm-hmm.
I always do a contracting session at the first bit of my engagement with anyone where we don't
Contracting session.
Contracting. But, we're going to be ongoing working together and we've got to know each other a little bit. But we need to contract. We need to understand what we're like as people and how you best want me to communicate with you and you vice versa. For anyone listening to this, mine is throughout our engagement that obviously we will be talking finances. And that can be one of the most emotional things for people to talk about. So I suppose what I'm saying is I try to set the boundaries of, are you okay to talk about anything? Because it's going to, your business is your livelihood. You are going to need to be honest and open with me. If you don't, that's not a problem. But then I probably need to think a bit selfishly and go, is this going to be quite difficult then to help them if I don't know the truth?
Sure, from a let's say a human standpoint, that's the human metric. What I was aiming for a bit more, I guess, was stuff like my notepad says, dipping margins, late payments, over reliance on one client, over hiring too soon, and specific ratio / KPI.
So from a very sort of numbery sort of point of view, so very simply, and the smaller agencies don't have it. Some of the bigger ones, the medium one, smaller to medium, don't necessarily. But what I would ideally like, a whole variety of reasons why it sometimes doesn't happen, but it's a very high level dashboard, and that would be, things like I'm talking a dashboard, not a detailed management account. So I think that's different. The flags, I want to see the sales versus the budget, or the GP versus the budget. Probably GP if we're looking at GP more as the metric. Obviously, the profit or loss at the bottom. Have we made money or not made money? The people costs to GP ratio, I definitely have that in there. The liquidity ratio, i.e. the current ratio I mentioned earlier on. How liquid are we? The debtor days, to your point, what is that day? Now, what I'd like to see is I want to see that on at least the last 3 to 6 months, okay? Color-coded, red, amber, green, within the targets that we're trying to look for. Okay, so green is good, red is terrible, amber's all right. But also, I want to see that for at least the next 6 months. So what a lot of people don't have is why I said it earlier on, the 4 tools. They don't have their pipeline that is confirmed revenue plus more than likely wins linking to their finance budget. So I would have that. So my dashboard would tell me what I've done. This is my management accounts. This is what I've done in that dashboard. This is my traffic light. Mm-hmm. But actually, I want to really, that's great. But in some ways, the past will help. We can learn stuff from it. But what does the next 3 to 6 months look like?
Which brings me to my next question, which is the struggling of balancing short-term cash flow needs with long-term financial health. How do you recommend agency owners navigate that? The short versus the long term.
So I would probably say, what would I do if I was running my own agency, which I don't think I would ever do when I see the challenges, but I would definitely explore getting an overdraft, because an overdraft is an insurance policy. Now, do I use my personal overdraft? No, because I'm like, whoa, I don't want to do that. Okay. That's my own personal opinion. Yeah. But I have one. It's there if I need it. And I suppose that for me is, we all know project-based agencies, you only need one big invoice to not come through and suddenly you've got a problem. So that for me is an insurance policy. But I would say don't use it, but I think that's what somebody should have in play. I think also, as agencies go forward, in the modern world, there's a lot more opportunity to be flexible in financing. So what I mean by that is, years ago, it used to be, well, you go and get a loan to get money into the business, or you go and do invoice financing, or factoring as it's called, where you put all your debtors through an invoice finance book and you get 80% of that, or roughly, on day one from the finance company. And then when you get the money from the client, you pay off the balance and they charge you a big hefty interest, and you probably have a management fee for it and so on. You don't need that in the modern world. So there's options like selective invoice financing now, where you could go, right, I've got a big invoice, I just need to borrow on that one because I know it's going to take me a bit of time to get it paid. and I'll put that through the system. So just one, and there's lots of reputable firms that provide this function. The challenge with that sometimes is, though, this is why I go on to debt, is that often your creative agencies, if you're doing what I say, you would pre-bill the work. if we were really trying hard, we'd get paid it before we started the work. But so the invoice finance providers will go, you can't necessarily borrow against that invoice because you haven't done the work yet. And then I suppose on the flip side, if it's then difficult to get that sort of thing, then there's loan options. Would I do a loan to run the cash flow of my business? Possibly not. It's more for me, for the one-off things. In the old days, people would go and move into a new office, refurb it. That's an exceptional event, isn't it? That's a once in a 5-year event. You might want to go and finance that. There might be, you want to do an acquisition of another agency or a small agency, an acqui-hire, as you might call it, by a few people.
What do you say to many agency owners that say, well, I have all these numbers, but I just don't know what to do with it? How can these people make their financial data useful in the easiest way?
No, I think part of the answer to that is it comes up even with quite a few people want to make their team aware of the finances. Now, obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean show every single cost of the business, the dividends, all the rest of it. But they want a good agency, in my view, will commercially train the team. Now, that I would say majority, that would be client services. But so how do they go about doing that? Notwithstanding the question about the owner, is I've done it with some of my clients. I would go and get somebody that really knows their how to present finance training very simply without too much technical speak, layman's terms. And I would encourage the owners, if anyone's listening, to go and invest in that and have a look for that. And if they don't know where to find it, I'm not trying to sell me here. I'm just saying, ask me. I know some people as well as us that would do it. But I think that bit for me is, layman's terms, explaining finance to the team. And likewise with the owner. The owner, I would say, either go and invest your time in getting somebody to help you, train you up a bit, show it to you, or have a fractional person on hand all the time.
And what about linking your team's performance to your metrics, to incentivize them to get deep into the nitty-gritty of what they're actually working for?
So I think the first thing is, and a lot of the insights and stats say, pay people fairly. Go and do your benchmarking. Go and work out what the salary rates are for jobs. And obviously that's changed quite a bit in the past few years, hasn't it? Development's very high, people will say. But if you want the best talent, you've got to pay for it. But go and do your benchmarking and make sure you're doing your best to pay people what they're fairly worth. I wouldn't go above and beyond that, okay? And the reason being is because it comes to my wider point. I'll come back to bonuses and that, but in the main, a lot of research papers and so on, and what I see a lot, and this comes back to employees asking for shares and all the rest of it, is people are motivated not by money. It's a sense of purpose. It's a sense of being part of something. It's career aspirations for some people, but it's also for some, it's just a clarity of what's expected for them and feel like they belong and that they're trusted. So it's not money. Now, there might be wider incentives around, if the whole team do well and hit a number, we might do something. But I suppose what I'm saying in a roundabout way is I've seen an awful lot, because I'm asked to input on this a lot, of examples of different bonus systems, commission structures, etc., etc., etc. Let's do one on everybody hits the sales number, or let's do one on everybody hits the profit number. But not everybody can contribute to the profit number. Everyone can, and actually it can create disharmony. One person's chasing that number for this purpose, the other person doesn't want to do that. So I suppose what I'm saying is and the stats say a lot of this, you pay people really well and fairly and you benchmark it. You look at the wider benefits that people can have, maybe a little bit extra holiday, maybe pension sacrifice, maybe healthcare. You look at the time of life stuff that your agency is. So if you're an agency of, I've got a few sort of legacy family agencies where they're an older generation, in the main, they're probably more incentivized by topping up their pension. So you look at, can we do something there? Or if it's the younger generation, perhaps they might not be as interested. So, what about, dare I say it, because they're going to be off work, extended maternity or extended paternity, because we want them to love this place. Mm-hmm. So it's not often about the money. It really isn't.
Mark, you are not just a financial consultant. You've also been deeply involved, or you're still deeply involved in building agency communities such as, or exactly, Agencynomics. Why is it so important to get agencies together and talk numbers and financials?
So I think the challenge in the agency world often is there are so many agencies, aren't there? We think there are roughly 30,000-ish in the UK. Nobody knows, because you could set up your laptop tomorrow, couldn't you, and start. But, the challenge there is it's so competitive. Now, the challenge is you cannot be a master of everything. You cannot, in my opinion, when you're early, do everything for a client. If you are, you might do okay for a little bit, but then it starts to break the model, because you need to hire, say you're a digital marketing person, you're a digital marketing agency, you get a website opportunity, you take it on because you need the money. You then need, we might need to hire a web person ultimately. They can be slightly different in terms of cultural values. Not saying it doesn't work, but it gets more challenging. So I suppose our thing was always, let's help the smaller indie space through community, because they can support each other and partner and so on. It's not such a big of a risk to them financially to take on these people. And when they get bigger, the business might narrow for a while, and then as they get bigger and bigger, they might go back out to be more full service. But we can help them on that journey. And so what we did was we wrote this book, had the community. We're getting a lot of people saying they love the book. But in March 2020, when COVID happened in the UK, in April 2020, we were allowed to open our community out to members, free membership. So it launched. We had about, on an app that we've got, a web browser as well, we got about 700 agencies join it quickly. It had about 1,700 agencies around, obviously a lot in UK, but quite a lot in Europe, some much further afield. My thing has always been about helping people connect. So I think we're better like that. So I've always had 12 to 14 people in a room, in a city, mainly for me, Edinburgh, Manchester, because one of my colleagues is there, London sometimes, got one in Glasgow soon. And that is a Chatham House closed doors room where we don't have a speaker, we don't have any themes that we create or talks. We just open the floor up to go around the table, what's on everybody's minds at the moment, and then we facilitate it. So again, for me, that's peer support again. And I get a huge sense of personal enjoyment out of that, because I can see that people are starting to help each other.
It is one thing that we also have noticed in Agency Life. It is, in fact, kind of the reason for the genesis of this podcast and this program at one point in time, noticing that agency owners have lots to talk about and lots to share with each other, but there's not always the right platform or the right environment for it. So we thought we'd create a little spot where we could do it.
We did. If this helps as well, because obviously quite a few agency owners talk about, obviously the community is a big thing, isn't it? In their marketing, build a community. That's, we're seen as the experts, all the rest of it. But yeah, I think what we've had a couple of very tried and very trusted partners in a couple of things, like a law firm, an insurance experts for the creative sector, etc. We've never gone at our community from the angle of accepting lots of other people getting involved for sponsorship and that, because we're like, it's for you guys. It's a peer support community. It's not a community to be, obviously we've had some money to sponsor us to run it, but we're not going to have 25 people in there selling to you. It's about you guys supporting each other. And I think that's why we've been, people tell us, successful in it. I don't like to think about it that way, but I think it's helped an awful lot of people, because they know they can go into that and feel like they've got a safe place. Bit different, maybe.
Yeah. In essence, it's kind of a bit of agency therapy, agency group therapy that you guys offer.
100%. Yeah. Probably for us as much as them sometimes. Yeah. So yeah.
Looking ahead, Mark, what do you think are the biggest financial challenges that agencies will start to face in the next 3 to 5 years?
Interesting. I think a lot of people are thinking that AI is going to squeeze everyone. A client's going to come to you and go, oh, well, the machine can do that now, so you're going to charge us less, aren't you, for those conversations? I would be going with the owners, let's do this little exercise of where we think we're going to go high level for the next few years. Let's model out the revenue high level. Let's model out some KPIs. Let's estimate how many people. We've got like Miro boards for all the structures and the stats around this at different sizes and all the rest of it. But let's then throw in that, maybe we're going to need a couple of, dare I say it, prompt engineers, and not the usual people doing the work. Yeah. So let's model that out. Let's think about that. Now, somebody raised this at the dinner last week. Okay, well, the finance guys are going to be going, oh, my revenue's coming down because the client is saying, you can't charge as much now, the machines do it. But actually, if we package up new services in some ways, or we get more efficient because we've got a prompt engineer, then maybe we will actually be able to maintain our revenue. But actually, maybe we need to be thinking like the next 2 hires, because they're saying, oh, the prompt engineers are really expensive, somebody said to me last week. But I was saying, yes, but the next 2 hires might be currently in your head at 50,000 euros each. Maybe we don't need those 2 hires. Maybe we need one 100,000 euro prompt engineer. That if we can get the AI bit nailed, actually maybe our services to our clients have got a higher value because we're actually really knowledgeable already.
Thanks for that, Mark. And also thank you for sharing your insights in this call. Where can people find out more about you and your many endeavors?
Oh, if you look at our Cactus website, so www.cactus, so CACT.us, so it's the plant. I'm on LinkedIn, Mark Probert. I only know of one other person in the UK with that name, so you should be able to find me. And just follow on there. I mean, there's plenty of stuff on our website, but I think there's a health check on my LinkedIn. It pings you off to do a health check your agency. You can have a look there, and that, we can do some pointers as to what areas you need to look at and so on. The book is still for sale. If anyone's interested, read a bit. If anyone wants a copy, they could just ping me a note. We're building our own AI tool at the moment, and we seriously are building it, not like some that aren't, where all our content and so on is in there. So it's called Tabitha. So if anybody's interested, so that will be literally like having an AI agency consultant, but we have built it. It's been, so if anyone's interested in that, look on our website for Tabitha, and you'll see some funny AI videos and some links to how you can understand more about it. But yeah.
And if anyone's interested in the book that Mark's friends Spencer Gallagher and Peter Hoole, if I get that right, wrote, it's called Agencynomics, fully revised edition 2021. Grow your agency to the first £5 million and beyond. There's a high chance that this conversation and perhaps that book also ends up in our upcoming Agency Life magazine number 3. So thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah.
For all the relevant insights, let's keep in touch. And to you, my dear listener, viewer, hybrid, that's a wrap for today's episode. Don't want to miss a single episode of Agency Life, ? Then head over to thisisagencylife.com, or if you like it Dutch, agencylife.be or agencylife.nl. Yes, we are indeed highly international. And binge all of our lovely content. And while you're there, please subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter. That way, each new episode gets dropped into your mailbox immediately. Thanks for listening and watching. See you next time.